Okay, so welcome to the workshop on research statement. This is a series of workshop on career development. We have covered CV development, and last week, no, 2 weeks ago, we have covered personal website development. And now this week, the theme will be research statement at the various stages. We have Andres talk about writing a fellowship application as a grad student. We're going to have David Martin, Johnny Greco to share their successful experience applying for Nsf fellowship and Hubble fellowship, postdoc fellowship. And lastly, we have our guest, Songhoo Wang, who is an inaugural 51 PAG fellowship at Yale University, and he will start his faculty position at Indiana University starting next month. So he's going to share with some of his tips in applying for a faculty position with a focus on research statement writing. So, and also as a advertisement for the next few workshops, we're going to have James Johnson telling us about some basics on GitHub. How do you have your repository on GitHub? How do you maintain or manage your code? And 2 weeks from then, we're going to have David Weinberger talking about writing academic papers. So we have a very good lineup in the coming weeks. But for this week, let's start it with Andreas. Andreas, are you ready? I'm going to enable everyone to be able to share screens.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
Well, so I guess the reason that you asked me to do this is because I successfully wrote a research statement and graduate application for the Department of Energy Fellowship. And I'll just show you the research statement, although we don't have to read the whole thing. But I mean, I guess the best advice I can give is that you should definitely take advantage of whoever is in the fellowship or whoever is in the department that has received the fellowship within, you know, the memory of the graduate students. And for the DOE, that's not that many people, but I think NSF might be more interesting to a lot of people. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, Pat has it. And then there were a few people that graduated not that long ago that got it. So even though I wasn't applying for NSF, I benefited from being able to look at their research statements. And I think, I don't know, I never got feedback on this research statement from the people that accepted my application. But I mean, the things that I thought were important were to just be very direct and answer every single part of the prompt directly, and also to go through multiple drafts because, I mean, especially, I don't think you can edit stuff right after writing it. So I think you need to give yourself many days to iterate multiple times and assume that the people that are reading it don't have any idea what you're talking about, which in this case, I think really applies, but maybe less so in the NSF case. And then for the NSF, which I think is the main fellowship that people apply to as graduate students, another piece of advice that I would give is that I'm pretty sure that Don has served on multiple NSF graduate fellowship committees. And in the past, he's given a workshop on it. So I know that he's happy to give some advice from that perspective on what a good research statement looks like. So, but I mean, in the context of a fellowship, I think you should try to find anyone who has this fellowship so you can look at their previous successful research statement. You can look at current fellows and get an idea of what kind of research the fellowship is looking to award, and then you can try to tailor the statement to that, and then also just directly and economically responding to every single part of the prompt.
So Andres, is the application form of the DOE very different from NSF? Here I see mostly text. Does NSF application allowed like figures or other supplementary data to support your application?
Yeah, NSF actually, everything is much, Jamora asked what fellowship it is. It's the Computational Science Graduate Fellowship. Yeah, NSF, I'm pretty sure it's just much bigger. The whole application is much bigger. I actually did apply to the NSF and I got rejected because my broader impacts was weak, I think is the basic summary of the feedback I got. And I think NSF still gives that feedback, although now I'm pretty sure you can only apply to it once. So it's less useful from the perspective of actually getting the fellowship. But yeah, NSF, I think you have a research statement that is about 2 pages. You can include figures, but the problem is that the length is in pages, not in words, unless that's changed, meaning that every figure you include will lose you a lot of words. I don't think that, I'm pretty sure that the successful NSF applications I've seen, Ben, who graduated, and also Stephen, I don't think they had figures. So just because you can't afford the space. And then after the research statement, there's this statement of, I think there's like this a statement of broader impacts, which is itself about a page, which involves your research, but I probably shouldn't say much because that statement was weak from, that's the feedback I got, was that statement was weak.
Okay, so the question is, if there is no room for very pretty pictures to be added in your application, based on your experience, how do you grab the attention of reviewers in retrospect? Like what in your statement that you think grab the attention and make the reviewers think that this application is merit for funding?
Well, I will say, I think that if you do have a really beautiful figure, maybe you can include it, but in my field, there aren't really pretty pictures. And I feel like any figure that I could include requires so much explanation that you might as well just get to it in text. So, I wouldn't be categorically against figures, but in my case, I don't think that it was ever worth. And also, Ben probably, I guess, implicitly agreed with me since he didn't include a figure either. But yeah, what exactly stood out? I'm not sure. I do encourage everyone to apply for DOE because even if the chance is low, you can see this research. You don't actually have to write that long of a research statement. But I think, reading this over again a couple days ago, I just thought it was pretty clear. The first paragraph states the problem, second states the method to solving the problem, and then they're very interested. They want to hear you mention that high performance computing. That's the whole point of this fellowship. So they want as many mentions as high performance computing as possible, I think is good. So then the next paragraph directly answers that question in the prompt. And then they also want to hear how what a successful program of study might actually produce. So, and I thought, okay, right. So then they also have a research statement here, and I think the thing that they also want is they want you to very directly tell them how you could evaluate the success of the research program. So I think that, I don't know. No one ever gave me feedback, but just reading over these, I thought that it's not a long paragraph, but I think that it was useful. It just tells them exactly what a metric of success is. So, which I think just means that shows that you're not shows that you've thought about it in the long term. So.
Yeah, I think it's very important to say the deliverables of the project, because people do want to evaluate the success eventually. If the more quantitative you can be in your metrics of evaluation, the easier for the reviewers to assess the difficulties or the feasibilities of your proposed project. Anything else you want to mention, Andres?
Well, I guess the one other thing about the figure is that, I mean, I just think you have to be careful, because because I think in text you can get away with not explaining things, but I think, but if you show a figure, I think people want to know, for instance, what the axes are. Like, I feel like if you have a really nice figure, then you should include it, but I think that in text you can get away with leaning on their not suspension of disbelief, right? But their willingness to just go along with what you're saying. But I feel like I just noticed the word auto and cross correlation functions. I'm pretty sure if I put a figure there that included either of these things, which are used constantly in my research, then I'd have to actually explain a lot more what they are, besides just saying clustering statistics, which is true, but it's just assuming a willingness to go along with what I'm saying from the reader of the application, because there's just not enough space. So, but.
Great. Thank you, Andres. And just to segue a little bit, because I do got notified that the Jamur Ji Wang got an honorable mention as a NSF fellow, and he's willing to share with us some of what he learned over the application process. So go ahead, Jamal.
Okay, thanks, G. So as G said, I'm Jamor. You probably know me by now. I'm entering my 5th year, and at the end of my 2nd year, I also applied for NSF. I did not get it, but I did get an honorable mention. And a lot of my takeaways could be somewhat modeled after what Andres just mentioned, but I'll bring up a few things now. Just let me pull this out. I'll screen share. Let's go to NSF comments. Okay. So again, I applied in the 2017 fall cycle. NSF is very, I would say, broad-based in the sense that these are my reviewer comments right now. You're welcome to look at or ask me for more details later. But the structure of it is that you have your intellectual merit, which are, why is your research good from the scientific standpoint, and the broader impacts of why is it good from a scientific sociological standpoint. You should do your best to explain each of those very well. And you get to explain them in 2 different, at least when I was applying, it was 2 separate essays. One was more of a background, who you are, what you've done kind of essay, which was about 3 pages long maximum. And the second one was a noticeably shorter 2-page, what do you want to do? Similar to what Andre said, you should somewhat make the assumption that people are not going to know what you're talking about, but you don't have to go to, high school level explanations, because the NSF and the DOE for their projects try to pick out experts in the field or something close enough that if you don't get too deep into the jargon, you'll be fine. To give you a sense of how difficult it can be to get some of these things, notice you have, I think, 3 reviewers, and they each grade you on intellectual merit with some explanation, and then broader impacts with some explanation. And you end up getting, rated somewhere between poor, which is, I guess, like level 1 to excellent, level 5. And in this case, I got 4 excellents and 2 very goods, and I didn't get it, but you should not feel discouraged. A second thing I'll mention, because Andres was specifically talking about the DOE, is that I also applied for a DOE fellowship. It was not the same one, So can you see this new screen I brought up?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So on this Word document is my application, not for the computational science fellowship, but for their graduate student research fellowship. So this one is after you pass candidacy, you can apply for this and you get a chance to work at a DOE national lab for anywhere from 3 to 12 months based on the project. It's somewhat similar in structure to the NSF one, but there is a little bit less talk about broader impacts, I would say, and more of why does the DOE as an institution care about what you're doing? Or why does the Office of Science, subsec? If you're doing astro, then you fall under the branch, most likely of high energy physics, either theory or experiment, or possibly some computational aspect, like Andreas mentioned. This application, much like his, the most extensive thing I did was add in an equation just to prove to them that I've done work before. And then a lot of this was me really spelling out, here's what I want to do, here's who I want to work with, here's why a particular national lab was critical for me to go to. So I was applying to work at Brookhaven, which I'll be starting at some point in the future. I don't know exactly when because of COVID. But I started out with, here's a project I want to do. And that's important. But because you're applying for a grant, in this case, to leave your institution and go work somewhere, you need to figure out which lab and which PI is the perfect person to work with. And you really have to sell all that as a package together. And I got kind comments, which they said were supposedly from my eyes only. But, they'll give you a lot of very detailed feedback on what you did, what you're doing right, and how prepared they feel you are. That's all I have to add for now. But I'll take any questions for a minute.
Can I interject to say that I think that if you're applying for DOE, any mention of computation, if there's any computation in your work, mentioning and highlighting it, I think probably would improve your chances, just because of that's a major focus of the Department of Energy for historical reasons. So.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. When I was applying under the high energy physics theory side, which has a subset of theoretical and computational methods in high energy physics, which underneath that you can get to cosmology. So my proposed project is about 50% computational, 50% analytical. But, I could have easily, I imagine, reworked this in such a way to emphasize doing something more computational. But I was fortunate enough to get it either way, so I didn't have to worry about that.
Oh, well, in your case, you're like applying directly to the lab, right? So you can even be more specific based on what you know about them, right?
Yes, I pick out a preferred lab and person or persons to work with. Mm-hmm. For your DOE thing, I believe you got to stay here at OSU, right? And just work remotely?
Yeah, I get to stay here, but you do go to a lab, but you don't have, the application process is not rigorous. You have to fill out an application, but essentially you've already made an agreement with the person who's going to accept your application that you're going. So it's, so you have to write a research statement, but it's not the stakes are very low.
Does the DOE application, where you apply to, I guess, for a certain PI, does the PI have to accept you, or is it just them, like the overarching entity, like the DOE accepts you and then the PI just has to deal with you?
Good question. So what happens in this case is I met with my local advisor Paul brought this up to me as a research opportunity. And then I brought it up with Chris Harada, who's my advisor. He thought it was a good idea. And then in talking with Paulo, who was a former grad student in the group, he suggested I work with Anja Slozar, who is the DOE lab scientist. So at that point, I organized a call between Anja, Chris, and myself, and we all sat down and had a discussion about what kind of project we could outline. And in terms of actually submitting the application, of course, I did a bunch of the legwork because I'm a student, but both the DOE lab scientists that I'm proposing to work with and my advisor, they each have to write a letter of support saying like, you know, my student can do this. I think working with this other person would be a great opportunity. You know, it can contribute to the science, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so essentially you have to get the other person on board, and then the DOE just essentially funds it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, for the jobs at this national lab or NASA facilities, what they usually do is they have advertisement for the project, and that is under the umbrella of a PI or a few PIs, and you apply for that link, and you have to first get through the reviewer. If they recommend your application, then usually the next step is to talk. Usually that happen before your application. You talk to the project, the PI first, to see if your proposed project is aligned with the advertised jobs. And then you start write your application, and then you got approved, and then you work with the PI for a particular project. That's usually what happened for those fellowships at the national lab or NASA facilities. Yeah, I think talking to people, talking to your future or potential advisors or employers is definitely a very good thing to do, because that makes, at least you get to know more about the project, and you know what to focus on in writing your own research statement. To the point is always good. For NSF project, you want to have a very broad, very broad vision, very broad view of the field. But for those specific project-oriented fellowship, then you definitely need to be very focused, very specific about what you do is good for that particular project. Okay, so we can save questions for Andres and Jamal in the Q&A sessions. Now let's move on to postdoc fellowship application. So Johnny or David, which one would you like to go first?
I mean, I can go because I could actually say a few things about the NSF in general, so it might
go ahead.
Be so. Yeah, so I was actually an undergrad at Ohio State and applied for the NSF for grad school. I was there and I was successful in doing that. So I think I could say a little bit about that. So I think for OSU in particular, probably one of the most important things that I'll say that you should take away from this is, if you haven't heard of it, OSU has a writing center. And, I'm pretty sure, if I didn't have the writing center, I don't know if I would have been so successful with so I applied for several different things and was successful each time. And they were just crucial to that, because they, depending on what you're applying for, they know they've done this so many times, and they have a great interest in OSU having successful applicants, right? So they will tell you, what reviewers look for, because they've heard feedback many, many, many times. And so, for the NSF in particular, they actually will have workshop sessions where they'll tell you specifically the sorts of things that you should keep in mind when you're applying for it. But I imagine they probably do this for other fellowships too. But just so anytime you're doing any kind of writing, they will proofread for you, give you pointers, and then also, for specific fellowships, they'll tailor it to that. And actually, I can post a link to that, to the writing center on the chat. The website's so different. I was like, it feels like forever ago that I was a student there, but I think this is their website. And I really encourage you to utilize this when you're applying for anything, because having another set of eyes is really, really valuable, especially for people who this is all they do all day long. So it's very useful. In terms of the actual application, I think this also crosses over for the postdoc for the NSF postdoc fellowship. And I think one crucial piece is, so broader impacts was mentioned. Yeah, it's a very big component. You have to, when I had meetings with some people that work for the NSF, they talked about it maybe being like a 50-50, how much you think about the broader impacts and how much you think about your actual research statement. I mean, they say that because they want this to be, you're supposed to devote something like 20% of your time to your broader impacts, at least as a postdoc. So it really should be a thoughtful component of your application. And for that, and for your research statement, a really important thing to do is to talk to people at the institution where you're going to bring it. Now, in this case, if anyone's going to apply for the NSF, I guess everybody is already here, so you're going to apply to keep it here. So then it's a matter of talking to people to see, for outreach and broader impacts, what exists. I see Wayne is on the call, and so he would be an excellent person to talk to about, to really come up with something and to tap into a program that's already established, because it'll help you, because they'll have resources. They will have written many proposals for whatever program they're doing, and they can help you craft your broader impacts and actually make it a significant component of your proposal. And then the same thing goes for your research. And so this is, again, applies to both the postdoc fellowship and the graduate student fellowship, is make sure you talk to whoever you're thinking about working with carefully, and really, because what the NSF wants to see is that you've really thought carefully about the synergies that exist at your institution, and how you will be able to be successful and make good on what you're saying you want to do in the proposal. So if you're applying to a different institution with the NSF for graduate school, an important point is they don't actually really care about that you're going to bring it where you say you're going to bring it. So I said I was going to bring it to Ohio State, and I was going to work with Todd Thompson. And so I had this whole thing about the supernova mechanism, and, so it's a little bit of a different game if you're an undergrad and you're applying to bring it. I don't know, maybe there are undergrads on the call, I don't know. So if you're an undergrad and you're applying to bring it somewhere else, it's a different game, I think, because they're more interested in the fact that you can craft a research proposal and latch on to some interesting piece of science and then, build a nice proposal out of it. But I think if you're applying for the institution you're already at, maybe it's a little bit different, and probably better, because you'll be established with somebody in terms of the sorts of research you're doing. I guess, should I share my screen? And I could show what my NSF proposal looks like for graduate, for the postdoc fellowship. So this is like notoriously the most horrible proposal if you choose to write it as for a postdoc, because it's really long. They treat it like an NSF grant, so it's very similar. It's a little shorter, but it's just like as if you were a faculty member and you're applying for an NSF grant. So in that sense, it's actually really useful to go through that process, but it's a huge commitment. But obviously I would say it can be worth it, because if you're successful, it's a great fellowship. And the other piece about it is they don't ask for any letters of recommendation for this particular fellowship proposal. So it really is based just solely off of the proposal itself. And so that can be maybe an advantage, or maybe in some cases a disadvantage if your letters are one of your strongest components, which can definitely be the case sometimes. But I can share my screen. I don't know if that'll be that helpful. Okay, so the other big piece of advice that I wanted to say was that if you can, getting examples of other applications that have been successful is an incredible help. And if you're applying for a postdoc fellowship, I'm willing to share everything I have. I spent a lot of time making it look pretty, so I'm happy to share like my tech, everything, so that way you can just use it and jump right into writing the text, because like having it look nice and organized, I think, is an important piece. And the NSF, if you do apply for the postdoc, you'll see there's a whole bunch of weird like sections where you're like, I have no idea what to write here. Let me see, what are some of the sections? Like, there's a section called facilities, equipment, and other resources you have to fill out. And there's a section called data management. And believe me, if you do this proposal, you'll be like, what am I supposed to write? This is silly. And so I'm willing to give all of that, because I think I just remember being so confused when I was filling out this application. So having that example, I think will be helpful. And so in terms of the writing the proposal itself, I think one piece of general advice I would give is the structure can be really important, and you should imagine someone's going to read this, but they're going to read a lot of them. And so you have to make it easy for them to look at it quickly and remember what your application is about. And so think about ways to do that. So if you look at successful proposals, you'll often find, you know, summary sections up at the top, or in certain places, bold font when, you know, the thing you really want them to know, like, I am going to do this because I am uniquely, you know, positioned given this to do this, to solve this problem, like have that be bolded, like things like that. So making it easy for them to pick up your application and remember, oh, this is the person that's going to whatever, you know. So I think that was a useful piece of advice that I was given when I was crafting this. And again, I'm very happy to share. Just let me know if you would like to see it. I was looking for the one I filled out for graduate school, but I don't know. I can't find it. I could look on some hard drives. But you know what? They've probably changed the format by now from when I did it. When did I do it? I guess it was 2013 or something. But I am happy to share anything. So just let me know, or chat if it would ever be useful. So I don't know if any questions, or I feel like I was rambling. Sorry. I'm looking at a bunch of boxes, so I don't know.
No, I think you make yourself very clear. One thing that I'm taking away is that definitely have fresh eyes to take a look at your application, right? Yeah. Especially people from outside your field. Yeah. The further away, the better, because you really want your application to be very readable. Because it's not guaranteed that the reviewers are your friends. They are like general astronomer or even non-specialist when looking at your proposal. So you really want to treat your reviewer like as a layman. And also, I think the important things up front, like usually what you propose to do should definitely be at the first page, if not the second page. I mean, there should be an executive summary at the very beginning of the proposal to summarize what you want to do and why you want to do it. And you know, attention span nowadays is really short, and if people can really pay attention to the first page, that's already a hooray for a lot of the reviewers. So bear in mind that however beautiful writing you have in page 7, 8, probably is not going to be read very carefully. So first and the second page are the most important one to really hammer your concept or your ideas into those reviewers' mind. That is super important.
And related to that, don't be afraid to ask people if they're willing to give your proposal a read. Like, you could ask me or some faculty member you don't necessarily work with, but I mean, just the more people that read it, the better, just like Ji was saying. So
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So talking about this NSF very long and complicated thing, how long did it take you to put it together? Just an order of magnitude would be fine, but like
actually that reminds me, I have this document that Rachel Bonanson, she just got a faculty job in Pittsburgh, but that she put together that talks about when you should start working on various things. And I want to say I gave myself like a month to sort of craft it. And so the NSF, the other thing that's annoying about it is it's due the earliest. It's due like in October or something, you know, really early, which can be nice because it's the longest. And so you get it all out. And then once you have that, you can, in principle, just make it shorter for other things. But that turned out to be hard. I remember when I was trying to shorten my NSF for the Hubble, it was a nightmare because anyways. But about a month would be my guess is what I spent on it.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and also remember that the people who you like to read your proposal before your submission will be very busy. So do not expect the turnaround time to be days. Usually it's weeks. So bear that in mind. If the deadline is October, you should have your research statement ready by September to give you enough time to go multiple rounds or multiple iterations with your proofreaders, so-called proofreaders.
Johnny, could you find that document that you just mentioned?
I will look for it and email Rachel and because it was actually very helpful. It basically says, okay, you're about to graduate and you want to apply for these things, and here's when you should start.
That would be great. Thank you.
And Astrobatter is usually a very good place to go. If you Google Astrobatter, they have application tips for postdoc and the faculties. So that's where I learned most of my knowledge in applying for jobs and postdocs. David Martin, anything to add?
Wait,
Sure.
could I ask a quick question, John?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay. Really quick, I know that you applied for an NSF in particular, but how important was it for you to mention NSF-specific projects as opposed to like a NASA project or a DOE project for an NSF fellowship?
Do you mean like that I would be working on NSF-related things? Is that?
Yes.
You know, I didn't think about that at all when I was applying. I don't know this for sure, but I don't think that factors in much. I don't think that they're gonna say, oh, this person's gonna do great science, but this person's gonna do a project that's gonna use an NSF funded thing or something. I can't imagine they do that, but I don't know.
NSF is more broad. NASA is very specific to ask you the relevance of NASA project.
No, they do. You're right. For the Hubble, they
JWST. Yeah.
About their mission. Yeah, that's right.
So this is a natural segue to David Martin.
Yeah.
Because he got Hubble. Go ahead.
Sure. Sure, I'm happy to share my experience. Before that, though, I will share my dog, just because he's got a broad audience now. Yeah, so I got a couple, in my PhD, I didn't do any fellowship stuff because that's not the way in Switzerland. Then out of that, I got 2 Swiss postdoc fellowships and then the Hubble, but I applied for the Hubble 4 times. And so I obviously failed 3 times and succeeded once. So I'm actually going to show you my first one and my 4th one, and we'll see very clear differences of what got better and a few things that I think you could already put into your first one to make it a lot better. Obviously, 4 years later, I've done more science, but even just the proposal itself got a lot better. I'll just give you a couple of quick details about the fellowships. They're very different to the NSF. No public outreach, broader opportunity stuff at all. It's targeted just science. You have to do about 3-ish pages of research proposal and about 3-ish pages of past and present research. You do need reference letters, you need an abstract, but otherwise it doesn't require that much, administrative work, to be honest. You don't even need to get anything official from the university you're applying it to. You should talk to them beforehand, but no one is really going to turn down a Hubble Fellow. The way the system works now is a bit different to what it used to work, but these days you apply for a broad Hubble Fellowship, and then depending on the type of science you're doing, whether it's more cosmology, general astrophysics, or planets, you'll be split up into an Einstein, Hubble, or Sagan Fellowship, respectively. That is different to what it used to be in the day, where you'd apply to potentially 2 out of those 3, like I used to apply to the Hubble and the Sagan separately, which was just a pain in the ass. So when you hear people say they're a Sagan Fellow or they're an Einstein Fellow, these days they've all gone through the exact same process. They just get split up. So I'll share my screen and just show you a couple of components of it. Let's do this. Okay, so this here is the past and present research. On the left is the one that failed. On the right was the one that was successful 4 years later. And I think a few things automatically stand out. Like this one's really shit. And on the left, and there's no subsections. It's just a big block of text. I talk about like my story as an astronomer, and it's just like a complete wank. And I think it's the type of thing that reads like someone who hasn't actually done that much science, that they're trying to pad it out. I think in my PhD I did a bit of science, but I didn't really come through here. And also, if we scroll through, no pictures at all. Like, whereas on my successful one, got some nice, pretty pictures. So very simple. Like, don't just have a giant block of text and have some pretty pictures. That seems normal, but I guess I didn't really do that. And be specific about what it is you have done. Like if you have a cool result, you know, show it. Be very clear about it. It's mentioned before, but, you know, I was told as early as like, you know, doing high school exams, that imagine that your person reading your exam is on their 5th cup of coffee at 2 a.m. at night. I mean, it has to be super clear. Don't just waffle on like I did here originally. You know, feel free to put in quantitative numbers. Quantitative numbers are helpful, you know, like, you know, I was part of a 4-year, 60-night survey, like, you know, stuff you can actually give a number to, or if you've gotten financial grants, you know, how many dollars, you know, how many targets were there? Like, I think these type of quantitative things are kind of handy. And of course, like this is the research you've done for 4, 5, 8 years or whatever. So just little highlights. And then of course, you know, pick out some good figures, and yeah. So I think, but the main one, okay, though, is the research proposal. So this is the research plan. Again, unsuccessful on the left, successful on the right. A few things we can do immediately. For starters, research plan at the University of Chicago by David V. Martin. Boring as hell. None of that. Instead, on the right, solving super Earth and mini Neptune formation with circumbinary planets. Like, bang, you're actually going to do something. Don't just give this generic heading. I'm already in the David Martin folder. They already know what my bloody name is. They already know I'm going. They don't care. And here, you know, on the left, you know, oh, I've already done this, but like, you know, we want to move on to something else. That's like a very boring way of presenting science. I think a more interesting way is to say, like, we've got a problem. We've found all these super Earths, but we don't know how they form. We have a problem. So already, you know, this is before I even mentioned circumbinary planets. And, you know, some of us might be in this situation where we feel like we're doing something quite niche. And indeed, circumbinary planets kind of feel a bit niche. But you're going to have to tell these people who are doing every type of astrophysics under the sun that your niche topic is worth, you know, 3-year prestigious fellowship. So no, you're not doing public outreach broad application, but it has to be broad to the astrophysics community. I think Johnny mentioned this as well. You know, put stuff in bold, like the absolute highlights in bold. Absolute highlights in bold. This one, so okay, that's a couple of points. Other points I would make, I think it's nice to have, when you're crafting your research proposal, think about the best and worst case scenarios of it, i.e. what happens if you fail and what do you get out of that? So for me, for example, I am looking for a certain type of planet. I'm trying to develop new techniques to find these planets. Obviously, with all science, there's a risk that I won't find them. So think about what happens if you don't find them, and do you have something that's kind of like a win-win? And so in this case, indeed, not finding something and constraining not finding it would still be a strong result. I think that's important also for observational proposals, just to think, okay, I want to make sure I get something out of this no matter what. Furthermore, if I look at my old proposal, you know, I said, again, these are the only figures I had in my old proposal. And I said, like, okay, these are the planets found so far, and I'm going to find them like this. But I didn't actually really say how. I just kind of waffled over like a couple of techniques I might use, but I didn't actually specifically say, this is how I'm going to find them. And again, be quantitative. I didn't say how many I'm going to find. Whereas on the right, I said, okay, this panel down here, this is the technique I'm using. I've actually already developed a prototype. I've developed a prototype, finds these small guys. And how many I'm going to find? Well, I'm going to find this many. You know, we've currently got this red curve. We'll go up to about 10. I'm going to take it to 30. I'm going to triple the sample. You know, just be really quantitative. I think is super helpful, because they want to be able to read this. They want to read this and think, okay, what's this 3-year person going to give NASA after 3 years? They might have great ideas, but I kind of want a little bit of proof. And so this might be why. So for the NASA fellowships, if you look at the histogram of when people get them, there's a peak at 1 year, so just coming out of your PhD, then not many at 2 and 3 years, and then there's a peak at 4 years. And I think this is probably like the peak at 1 year is probably an amazing idea, but maybe not. And the 4 year is you've got a whole postdoc's worth of science under you. Again, like, you know, planetary candidates, like actual quantitative things. I've already done some of the work, so it's less of a risk. This one, I actually did 2 projects. I actually proposed 2 projects. I think it's okay to over propose a little bit. You got to propose something that is doable, but obviously seems ambitious. But I really proposed 2 projects, or they're connected. And then this is a little thing that I've started adding to stuff. I think this whole scientific legacy thing is kind of nice, because people want to see, you know, not just you've made a bunch of detections if you had a great postdoc, but like, what impact will this have on the community? How will we go forward with science after that? And again, like other little technical things, if we look at the references from left to right, I've got way more references, but taking up less text. So little things like that, you know, you can double column your references. You can use a smaller font, things like that. That's probably the only main points I'd like to bring up. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure, mate.
The table that you have in the first attempt, do you have a specific reason why you did not, you know, have, I mean, I assume that information is reproduced in the text, right? But do you have a specific reason why you removed it?
Sure. I think that actually, so this table is basically outlining trends that I discovered during my PhD. And so they got moved to the past and present research because I think that was more appropriate. So really this stuff here in the table got moved to these sort of subsections here. I mean, a table is actually not, I don't think a table is bad per se. It's better than a giant block of text. Yeah, so if you can actually summarize your data in a nice table, that's actually not the worst idea. But I think this was, you know, there was too much talk about what I'd already done, whereas this research proposal should be about what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I asked because to me, the table looks nice. I don't know. I mean, the middle the origin column seems really useful.
Yeah, it's not. This is not the worst part of the proposal. To be fair, it's yeah. That's actually not a bad part.
Yeah, I think for observers, they like to use tables because, you know, if you have a sample and you want to show progress, you can use this color coded to highlight things you have done, things you propose to do. That will give a very clear idea to the reviewers that, you know, the fraction of completion of the project, and they also give people a sense of the feasibility. So I think that's usually very good, and also show you have a detailed plan as of when to do what, right? Because that's very important, because people want to see this detailed plan, very well thought plan, and also a timeline of a project to make sure that it can be completed within a certain time frame. Yeah. So yeah, and I have one comment, which is definitely a personal style thing. I usually would like to put the main message at the beginning of a paragraph, because I notice a trend that when people read, they tend to read the first sentence of a paragraph. So if you have anything that you think is important, try to put it at a very beginning sentence, or you can do this as what David does to highlight the certain things. Because I noticed that he usually, you put the best, save the best to the end, like saying, yeah, no, this is the punchline. I'm gonna put it.
It's a good point. Yeah, I think I like to build a story, and it builds up throughout the paragraph, and it's like bang with this thing. But I agree that if that's not in bold, then 3 a.m. on your 5th coffee, there might not be a bang at all. So in that case, you might want to say, you know, I will produce, you know, detection or not, I will produce a revolutionary result, and then here's why. That's a good alternative. And also the other thing I'll just say, you know, mentioning tables, like, you know, astronomers, when they use a table, and they use it well, it's great. But often astronomers just put in some like completely like overwhelming amount of detail table in there that's completely irrelevant. Like I mean, maybe not so much for proposals, but particularly for talks, they'll just have this data on there completely useless. So try to avoid that. And also same in your plots. These are not perfect plots. To be honest, the axes could be a lot bigger, but everything is conceptually very simple. You know, this is just flux over time. This is radial velocity over time. This is, you know, a histogram as a function of size, like, you know, simple plots. And because you're not going to be necessarily doing someone that's in depth in your niche as you, they're again, 5th cup of coffee, 3 a.m. So really simple plots. So maybe you've got a beautiful plot for your paper, but it's got more detail than you would actually need to convey your scientific project. So don't just put the paper plot in there and just expect people to ignore some stuff. Like just white it out. Like just put it in the keynote and just draw some white around it and get rid of the fluff. Because it's really everything you have on here has to be useful. You can't afford having any stuff that's a waste. Yeah,
that's a great point. Don't be lazy because you think you made great figures in your paper, but it's not necessarily the best representation of your research in the proposal.
Yeah, and same with talks. Like this is my number one pet peeve for talks is people copy paste a paper figure into a talk, and a great paper figure is not necessarily a great talk figure.
All right, thank you, David. Anything else? If not, we want to move on because we do have some senior grad students and some postdocs among the audience. We would like to hear from Songhoo Wang about his experience in this year in applying for jobs. Why not get started, Songhoo?
Hi, thanks for having me. All these comments and suggestions are great. I wish I learned this before.
You're set now, it's fine.
Yeah, I feel really lucky and grateful to land a job this year. It's definitely a hard year for everyone. So I hope my suggestions will help you guys a little bit. Since you guys are in different stages and different fields, I think I will only focus on something very general, and some points have already been covered by previous speakers. But since I did my PhD in China, so there is no such thing as a grad school fellowship, graduate fellowship. So some suggestions may only work for postdoc and faculty application. So I think there are 3 things very important. I was thinking about this last night after Ji contacted me. So I think the first thing Ji and Julian already mentioned, you need to, it's very helpful if you can start to write your thing early, because it usually takes several rounds to polish a very good statement. For example, I wrote my first faculty application draft last year, not last year, the year before last year. Since there is a particular faculty job that I feel I can fit very well, and I prepared everything and applied it and got shortlisted. But I didn't get that job. So the past job season, when I went back to that research proposal and read it, I go like, what's this garbage? So but I still use that garbage and got shortlisted. So I think it's you will definitely keep improve your proposal, but one common mistake people usually make is thinking, I'm not ready this year. That's a very common mistake if for both postdoc and senior graduate students. I think it's worth to try earlier, especially because you need some luck in your job application. So try one more time, it's very worthwhile. So I think if you are this fall, you are 4th year, you have a 3 or 4 publications, why not? You won't lose anything, right? So I think in that case, if you can write everything early and apply it early, that's at least you can learn a lot. So the second suggestion, I forgot who, but also mentioned this, to customize your statement. Unfortunately, especially for postdoc application, most of deadlines packed into those several specific days, like November 1st, November 15, December 1st, December 15. So especially for me, I need to submit all those applications in last days. So it's very hard for you to customize every single proposals, but it's still very worthwhile to do. So, Johnny mentioned this, the different institutions want to say how can you use their resources effectively. So you need to do some research, like what do they have, what facilities do they have, who are there, and do you have some research overlap with them and mutual interests with them, and do they have computational resources? Usually, even your observers, usually the department or institution have some awesome computational resources. You need to come up with some idea. Maybe you will not work on it immediately, but in the near future. So I think that's also very useful for to customize your proposal, not submit the same proposal to everyone. And the last one, I think Johnny also mentioned this. So you need to ask, or Ji also mentioned this, you need to ask someone to read your proposal. And I think especially for, you need some faculty members who are not in your field to read your proposal. Not proofread your proposal. They don't need to spend 15 minutes. You just need to give them and let them to have a look, just 2 to 3 minutes at most. So this is like a dress rehearsal of the selection process, right? It's most likely your proposal will go to someone who are not familiar with your work and spend 2 to 3 minutes at most on your proposal and judge it if it's good or not. Sounds crazy, but they read enough applications and know how to judge which one is good or not. So ask the faculty members who are not in your field and have a look, get a glance, and give you an impression if it is good. As David just showed, you can immediately see the difference of 2 proposals. So I think that's also very useful. And that's basically three general points I can come up. You need to write it early and customize it for different institutions, and find someone else, especially someone else is not in your field, to read it. Oh, by the way, when I applied the 51 PAC-B fellow, I also found the development office. It's like Johnny mentioned, the writing center. They have a lot of experience to apply for different fellowships, grants. They know how to write good proposals. If you have access to those office, that will be great. So on that note, I think the last thing I want to mention is this is definitely a hard year, especially for those who are going to apply jobs, because job application process itself is already very stressful. So I hope you guys will be all well. Thanks.
So I have a question. So in your experience this year, so when you develop your research statement, what is the most useful feedback you got from those quick look feedback from the faculty members?
I think the format is a big thing. To highlight the most important thing and to choose the right font and to just the format, I think is the most important thing. And also for faculty proposal, it's a little bit different from postdoc, is you need to link your work to your mentoring experience as well, like, because as a faculty member, you are not only working with yourself, but you need to provide the projects for students. So you need to show why you need to show you have a different ideas for different stage students.
So just on that, so did you like explicitly say like, okay, here are a couple of ideas which I think would be great student projects? Like, were you that specific?
No, I basically mentioned I talked about two main projects, and for each I have two minor projects for each. And I mentioned this project. I already worked with a student on this project, and there are a lot of other things to do in this project. Implied this is a good project for students. I didn't specifically say, but this is what I learned from Johanna Teskey. In my interview talk, I did mention that this is a good project for grad students.
And also, how this came up in one of the previous things we talked about is how far in the future were your projects? Like
that's an awesome question. That's an awesome question. I think I applied both postdoc fellowship and faculty this year because this is my last year at Yale. So I basically use the similar thing, but for faculty job, the vision is a little bit longer, but not extremely long, because I just can't say where are we going to in next 10 years. Okay. I didn't mention Habex or Louvar, anything like that.
Well, I guess Indiana has Newid, so a lot of they want someone who can use Newid. So.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I forgot to mention, for example, that's why you need to do some research about different institutions. Newid is very obvious, and I definitely stress that in my proposal because they put that in their advertisements. But I also found they have access to the University of Florida 15-inch telescope. Jim must know this much better than me. That's also a radio velocity telescope, and I briefly mentioned that I can use that telescope as well. So I think to do some research about institution is very useful.
Yeah, one thing to add to that is that if there is no conflict of interest, it's definitely recommended to talk to some of the faculty members in the department you have interest in. Right? Sometimes because some faculty sit in a committee, they cannot talk to you. But for other people who do not have a conflict of interest, having a conversation with them, sharing your vision, sharing your plan, and get some feedback from the department members would definitely be very useful. And yeah, for the interest of time, we cannot continue that very long, but just to echo some of the remark that Songhu just made, I think in applying for faculty job, you definitely need to customization because there's only probably 5 positions that you think really fit for you. So pay special attention to those jobs. And also starting early definitely helps because you never know when your dream school will have a position for you, right? You don't want the application for your dream school be the first one you try because you will be so immature, you will be so unprepared if you got shortlisted or if you at any stage you will be unprepared. So start earlier so to prepare for the opportunities at your dream school. I think that's definitely the very important advice. And I think, yeah, we cannot go any further, continue any longer, but thank you so much for people who bring the very useful, to chime in this very interesting discussion about research statement writing. And the whole video is being recorded. I'm going to be sharing this video link with people who cannot attend. Thank you again. We'll see you in 2 weeks then.
I just wanted to say that I got Rachel's permission already to share this document, so I put it on the chat. And so it's a sketch of like an outline of if you're planning to take the academic route, how you should maybe think about planning your last year of grad school. So.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Johnny. Okay, bye, everyone.
You guys.
Bye.